Hello, I want to make a video about globalists and their attempts to control the thoughts of indigenous peoples and nationalists and so on. Globalists want to control nationalists' thoughts, indigenous people's thoughts, because nationalists or indigenous people's thoughts oppose globalism. The idea that you have a country of your own, that you have a right to a particular country, is in opposition to globalism. Globalists want everything to be about money, and they want to buy everything and own everything, and so rule everything. Nationalists think they have a right to a country, even if they don't own much of it, and even if, say, for example, they're unemployed and very poor. So the idea of having a right to a country is a very different kind of political notion to the idea that you can buy everything and own everything by buying it. Globalists are money-obsessed people. They don't like nationalists at all. Nationalists are more idealistic. They believe in rights that don't necessarily have anything to do with money. Okay, so in order to do this, in order to control nationalist thoughts, they're trying to cripple and terrorize our minds by proscribing, that's outlawing, essential thought patterns, and by enforcing others in ways that will continually terrorize people. They want to proscribe, that's enforce, no, they want to proscribe, that's outlaw, generalization, and they want to enforce qualification. They say things like, don't generalize, and qualify what you say. Okay, I'm now going to say why that's bad. Okay, first let's just take England as an example. They used to try to control us with more aggressive means. They used to call us a bastard race and a bastardized people. Only a few years ago, they did that for several years in a row. They stopped it because people just didn't like that. They used to tell us that foreigners had been coming here for hundreds or even thousands of years and mixing with us, and that meant that they were as English as we are, and that they therefore had as much right to be here as we indigenous English have. And well, some people have always said that, but they got very heavy with it towards the end of the new Labour years. But people just were very tired of it. They didn't like being called bastards. They also told us we were lazy and stupid, too stupid to do our own work, that foreigners were more qualified to do it than we were. People didn't like being called lazy and stupid either. And they knew none of it was true. They knew all those things that they were saying about us weren't true. And it was very abusive of our leaders, so-called, to take positions of power over the whole country and then treat us like that. And in the end, it got them chucked out of power. Well, now they're trying a different tack, trying to tell us how to think. They've found ways of thinking that naturally back up the arguments and just social strength of nationalists. Generalizations, for example, help nationalists, so they don't want nationalists to generalize anymore. They don't want people, they're trying to tell people not to generalize anymore. And qualifying what you say, having to do that all the time, basically demeans people socially. I'm going to go into that now. Okay, so do not generalize. Generalizing is what has, and is basically the learning process. It's the identification of trends. When you're little and you keep going out in the rain and it's wet every time, You learn it's wet when you go out in the rain. That's a generalization. You call it learning, but it's the identification of reality, or at least of trends in reality. The rain is always wet. If you walk in front of a car, a moving vehicle, you're probably going to have an accident. That's a generalization. You need to be able to generalize to stay alive. Generalizing that one shop is generally cheaper than another enables you to save money. You know, generalizations are things that you do all the time. If you couldn't generalize, you'd be in big trouble. What do they mean when they say don't generalize? They actually mean don't generalize in a way that doesn't assist their globalist agenda. They mean don't be nationalistic, don't be a nationalist, don't seek your own interest, seek the globalist interests. Don't oppose globalism, or else, you know, they might be more powerful than you, or they might have some power in your life. Whatever, basically the idea is you don't get to generalize because you're following your agenda, not theirs. The idea being that you're a bad person if you're not a globalist. You're a bad person if you don't think other people's interests are as important as your own. You're a bad person if you don't want to serve other people's interests as much as your own. Although the globalists are certainly serving their agenda by trying to rule the world, by trying to own and therefore rule the world. They're certainly following their agenda. And whenever they pretend to care about other people who are poorer in other countries and try and tell you you're bad for not being a globalist and not caring about other people in poorer countries as much as yourself, what they really mean is you're not following a globalist agenda. They're going to make trouble for you if they can. They're going to call you bad people because you stand in their way of owning and ruling the world. So who's bad? They are. Okay, so you need to generalize, and the idea that you shouldn't generalize is just in order to stop you from following a nationalist agenda. So how can that be shown? Well, you might say something like, well, take my own experience. You might say something like I say, which is that black people are violent. That's my general experience of them. In fact, I've found every black person to either be violent or, if they're not capable of physically hurting you, malicious. They'll tell lies about you, for example. Now, they're a globalist or left, well, they call themselves left. They try to infiltrate the left. Maybe the left was always globalist. But anyway, a globalist will say, or a fooled, silly leftist will say, don't generalize. They used to just call you a racist straight out, but that hasn't. People have gradually begun to demand the right to live in the real world about race and nation and rights and things like that a bit more lately. So they're starting to impose other behaviors, try to impose other behaviors, other means of thought control. They're no longer calling you racist so much. They're more saying things like you're generalizing. I think that you have to be able, if you can't generalize, then you can't live safely. For example, I might say to a white person who doesn't know much about black people, be careful of them, they're violent and dangerous. Now, if they've been brainwashed, they might say, don't generalize. That just puts them in a dangerous position. They don't know what to expect. Say you were in a place like South Africa, which has dangerous areas in it, or America, or somewhere with dangerous areas. You would need to be able to say, don't go into that part of town, a particular part of town, because it's dangerous. Okay, that's a generalization, but, or it might be certainty. But whatever, you need to be able to make it. Okay, so telling you can't generalize